Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a continued passion for public television, we are proud to underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES television.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, many Louisiana political players gathered to share gossip and seek support last weekend, only instead of being in Baton Rouge, they were in Washington, D.C. at the Krewe of Louisianians ball, where some national politicians might be well advised to see how Louisiana politics is done. We'll hear what one political reporter learned in the halls and behind the walls. Well, never has the question of who will be the next governor been outweighed by who will coach the Denver Broncos. But that's the kind of week it was as Sean Payton headed for the mountains. Meanwhile, at a special session of the state legislature, the delegates have tried to resolve the state's insurance problems. We will discuss these stories tonight, as well as the city's interim police chief offering a new crime-fighting plan. COVID is still around, but is it still the same? And the Pelicans take a dive. Joining us are our Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Rod Walker, sports columnist, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And from Baton Rouge, Jeremy Alford, editor and publisher, La Politics Weekly. Long time, Jeremy, we haven't seen you around here, and came all the way from Baton Rouge. I'm glad to have you here around our table again. Well, you were also in D.C. for the ball. So tell us about it. What kind of partying was there, and what kind of business was done?
Well, you know, it's Washington Mardi Gras. It was the biggest crowd ever attended. So you had a few thousand people there. A few probably remember actually what happened at Washington Mardi Gras. But, you know, excess is one word that I would use. There seems to be more people spending more money on this event than ever before. Really? I'm not sure if I'm watching the fall of Rome or if it's just another year in Louisiana politics. I think we all know it's the latter. But, you know, you definitely knew it was a statewide election year because there was official Washington Mardi Gras at the Washington Hilton with the ball and the dinner dance and everything else. And then there was unofficial Washington Mardi Gras fundraisers everywhere. Fundraisers for state representatives, fundraisers for parish presidents, fundraisers for attorney general candidates, gubernatorial candidates. So I think this is one of those years where I think everyone feels like they need to be not only seen at Washington Mardi Gras, but also kind of have a little piece of it.
So there was a lot of political business, it seems, being done. And certainly, you know, the big thing, there are a lot of elections going on this year, certainly, but the real big one, of course, is the governor's race. What's the buzz? What was the buzz? What was the feeling? You
know, I think it's a waiting game right now. And on the Republican side, that waiting game is focused on Congressman Garrett Graves. And we learned at Washington Mardi Gras that Congressman Graves received a new leadership spot in the House GOP. He worked very closely with the new speaker in his internal election, but he was very quick to go around. Congressman Graves was very quick to remind folks that I didn't release this news. The speaker did. I don't know what I'm doing about the governor's race yet. On the Democratic side, we're waiting on three people. Transportation Secretary Sean Wilson, Party Chair Katie Bernhard, and East Baton Rouge District Attorney Hiller Moore. Katie Bernhard and Sean Wilson were both at Washington Mardi Gras working it pretty hard. But neither kind of tipped their hat as to what they're going to be doing. So that mystery remains a mystery coming out of Washington Mardi Gras.
Okay, so whomever's elected will succeed a Democrat who has been in the governor's seat for the past 8 years, soon to be 8 years. Of course, that's Governor John Bel Edwards, you know, and the state, certainly in terms of the legislature, has gotten increasingly GOP. Is it really going to be a race between the Democrats and the Republicans? Does a Democrat really stand a chance to win the governor's seat again, you think?
I think people who spend money and make money on Louisiana politics will tell you that more than likely there's going to be a Republican elected. But I would argue that each open race for governor, we learned something new about ourselves and our electorate. 8 years ago, we learned that party fundamentals shouldn't always be the guiding light in a governor's race. A lot of folks would not have bet against David Vitter 8 years ago, and then we saw a Democrat elected in the Deep South. That was a big deal, remains a big deal. I think what we're learning this cycle is not only that we need to remember that lesson from 8 years ago, but we're also learning that, hey, not everyone has to be announced by February.
But they really hit David Vitter hard with the liaisons and the sexual thing. And I think that's ultimately what undid him. I don't think he would have been defeated had it not been for that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a prostitution scandal will slow down anybody.
Yeah.
Even in Louisiana.
That's right.
That makes a big difference, I mean, in understanding it.
It does, because I think when Louisiana voters vote for a member of Congress or a U.S. Senator, they're voting to send them away to Washington, D.C. But when you vote for a governor, you're voting for a man or a woman who's going to be probably in your child's school maybe at some point. They're definitely going to be in your living room a lot with all the natural disasters and hurricanes we go through. So it's more intimate and it's more personal. And if you got skeletons in the closet and you're holding another office and you got away with it, you might want to think twice about running for governor, because those skeletons will come out in that race.
Well, there's the major state issues that people were talking about.
That's an interesting question, because I was on a panel recently, and the advocate's Lanny Keller pointed out about 30 minutes in that we had been talking about personalities in the governor's race and no issues. And I think that's going to be kind of the way things go this year. We have these huge personalities in the governor's race, people who really like to fight, and I think it's going to be personality driven. So what we're seeing already are associations and special interests are going to step up and fill that gap on a policy discussion. We're seeing the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry has something called LA 23. And then you have PAR, Cable, Committee of 100. Those two government groups and the Economic Development Group are going to do something called Reset. And they're hoping to gather information across the state and try to come up with a loose framework for some kind of policy agenda next year. But look, the biggest personality in the race right now is Jeff Landry. He has more money than anybody. No one's going to come close to touching the Attorney General. And he's talking about a lot of red meat issues, everything from banning certain books in public libraries to the way the state's finances should be approached if the company the state's doing business with is taking a serious look at sequestration or carbon capture or other green methods.
So in terms of the legislature and also the Washington Mardi Gras, what kind of focus and talk was there about the GOP getting even more strength in the legislature?
Yeah, there's been a slow effort over the years, dating back to 2007, of Republicans trying to capture a supermajority in the legislature. And it's been slow progress, but right now the Republicans do have a supermajority in the Senate. They're very close in the House, and all those folks are starting to meet again and figure out what to do. Kind of the hub for all of that activity is going to be the Louisiana Committee for a Conservative Majority. For years, that was co-chaired by Attorney General Jeff Landry and U.S. Senator John Kennedy, but Jeff Landry has removed himself from that position to run for governor, and now John Kennedy alone is in charge of the Louisiana Committee for a Conservative Majority. As I understand it, he's not going to get involved in the governor's race, but he will be active in interviewing legislative candidates.
Okay, so Governor John Bel Edwards will be leaving office, and he's been really, by all accounts, very popular governor. Any other politics for him?
He says no. He says he's going to go home and practice law, and I think that there is a big part of him that is looking forward to that, and I believe him.
Okay.
I think more importantly, he says his wife says no, too.
That's very important. Absolutely.
I think that's the driving force.
Very important. All right. Thanks a lot, Jeremy. And we'll be talking a little bit later on in the show about a real important issue, and that is insurance and what the legislature is trying to do about it. But first, let's talk to Sean Payton. And he's heading to the mountains, as Errol wrote. He's going over to Denver. So tell us more about that deal, and what did the Saints get out of this?
Well, I guess, first of all, what the Saints got out of this is they got a draft pick, which they desperately needed. This is a team that didn't have any first-round draft picks. They had to, with them still holding the rights to Sean Payton, they were able to get something back in return for him. So now they get a first-round draft pick, the number 29 overall pick, which is almost like a second-round pick because it's so close to the end. But at least it's something, and this is a team that needed a draft pick. They also got a second-round draft pick for the 2024 season. And they had to give up a third-round draft pick for the next season. But again, they got something out of it, which is really all you can ask for at this point. And when you talk about Sean Payton, I don't know if I would have been surprised whatever he had done. I mean, if he had returned back to Fox Studios, I would have been like, okay, that's what he's going to do. And but he ended up taking a job, and that surprised a lot of people, I believe.
Because I was surprised. I mean, it always seemed like he was really joined at the hip with the Saints organization, that loved the Saints organization, and wouldn't coach anywhere else but with the Saints organization. And then he leaves and says, okay, well, he's tired, then he goes back to another team a year after. I'm wondering, though, if the reasoning might have been, if he went to another organization, he'd probably get more money than he would have gotten if he stayed with the Saints another year. But then also, the Saints would get draft picks. And so he comes out ahead, and the Saints come out ahead. Could that be part of the discussion?
With them having his contract rights, up through next season, the Saints were going to get something in return if he decided to coach. I don't know if that was the reason. I thought he got burned out here. I mean, he had been here since 2006 season, right after Katrina. Mm-hmm. And I think when you're at a place for a long time, I just think sometimes you just need a fresh start. And I sort of think that's where he was. And I mean, I'm not sure if it was the team or the city of New Orleans, but I think he just wanted something new, and he was able to find something that he feels is similar to what New Orleans was. Denver has a very passionate fan base, just like this city does, and I think all that kind of played into it.
Well, he certainly was doing a great job on television. I mean, he really, really was fun to watch. He looked like he was very much at ease with that. But I would guess professional football as a coach is really just very hard for somebody like Sean Payton to resist.
Yeah, you have some guys. There was Bill Cowher, who was a former coach with the Steelers. He went to the studio, and everybody thought, okay, one day he'll come back to coaching, and he never came back. And then you have these other people like Sean Payton that are just so competitive. We saw Tom Brady as a quarterback do the same thing last year. He retired and came back. They just have to scratch that competitive itch they have, and so he's back at it again.
So for Denver, did they get a good deal here?
I think so. I mean, I think Sean Payton, we saw what he did to the culture of football here in New Orleans, and he changed it. I mean, he raised the bar of expectations, and I think he'll do the same thing at Denver. They struggled this past season. Russell Wilson had a rough year as their quarterback, but Russell Wilson's a really talented quarterback, and he's a guy that, there were reports a couple of years ago that Sean Payton was interested in bringing Russell Wilson here, so now he gets him in Denver.
Well, we wish him luck there, as long as he doesn't play the Saints.
He's going from the city in the league with the lowest elevation to the city in the league with the highest elevation. So he's going to find the air to be thin over there.
Yeah. That's definitely true.
And maybe the patience also. We'll see.
I think we'll always have images of Sean Payton in that Super Bowl parade here in the city, holding that trophy up. You couldn't find a happier person in the world.
And the night they won the Super Bowl, he actually slept with the trophy.
I guess he really, really appreciated it. Okay, Dawn, let's go on over to you, because COVID, it's still there. It really is. It may not be the public health crisis that we were in 3 years ago, but it's still there.
Well, I will tell you that Errol called this week and said, let's talk about COVID. It seems to me when people are talking about COVID, they're just talking about a common cold these days. Is that true? No, it's not true. COVID, unfortunately, Errol, is still COVID. It's just a different variant. Now we're dealing mostly with the Omicron subvariant XBD 1.5. And what...
if I'd known that, I wouldn't have said it.
Exactly. And what Dr. Fred Lopez, infectious disease specialist at LSU, told me is that the strains, as they keep changing with this virus, it's a bizarre virus, because as the new strains emerge, they're not only more transmissible, more easily transmissible among all of us, they're also better able at evading immunity. And that's whether you get the immunity from being previously sick or from being vaccinated or both. So they are things that spread as easily as the common cold, and they are doing that. In the state, in the nation, overall cases and hospitalizations have been on a downward trend. Louisiana had a bit of an upward tick at the end of January. We don't know why. It looks like it's going back down. But in the last week of January, there were 10,232 cases reported in the state. And those are, you've been to the doctor, you've been to the Minute Clinic, you've been somewhere and actually had a test. It's not someone who tested at home and tested positive and didn't report it to anybody. So 10,000 cases in a week. And also we had, during that same time, a 7-day average of 6 deaths a day for a little while. So I just want to remind everybody that in the course of this virus around the state, 18,572 people have lost their lives to COVID. So it's not just a common cold. It really is a big deal. It still continues to be worse for people who have underlying health conditions or weakened immune systems. And it's worse for people who are older. I asked today for a definition. What is the medical definition of older? it's me. It's anyone 50 and older is medically considered older, and the older you get, the harder it is for your body to be able to fight the disease and the virus. What they recommend is the same stuff we've been talking about for years now. Distancing, washing your hands. By all means, stay home if you don't feel well, because that's how we spread it. If you're sick, if you have a fever, if you have symptoms. The other big thing to do though now is actually to get tested or to do a home test because if you know what you have, unlike 3 years ago, there are now treatments available. Whether it's the flu or COVID or a cold, there are treatments that can help with all of your symptoms. That Paxlovid mostly for COVID, but there's new flu medication on the market called Xofluza, which is a single pill that actually helps with the flu. We had an early flu season here in Louisiana and around the country this year. It seems to have tapered down. Dr. Lopez said there is a new strain of flu B circulating that is also covered by the flu vaccine. So, Mardi Gras is upon us, and crowds are upon us, and that's where we spread our germs to one another. When we're in close quarters, when we're standing right next to each other on the street, coughing or sneezing or talking loudly. So it's not a joke. It is still here, but there are more mitigation measures than there were before, both for yourself and for the community at large.
And of course, vaccines are out there too.
Vaccines are out there.
Urge you to get vaccinated.
They are absolutely urging you to get vaccinated, especially people who are more vulnerable. Because the vaccines are actually work better than the flu vaccine. The flu vaccine is taken only by about 50% of the eligible population. COVID vaccines are even less than that, but they are actually effective at helping reduce the severity of the virus.
Right.
Not necessarily preventing you from getting it, but definitely reducing the severity.
Okay. All righty, Don. Thanks a lot. Hey, let's go on over to you. And the interim police superintendent for New Orleans Police Department has released what is her crime prevention plan.
In the same day that the council was presenting plans too, there's nothing shocking in the things that you came up with. Some of them are things that have been around before, but I guess the big thing is, like Oliver Thomas pointed out, is sustaining these things, having the ideas and going ahead with them. I mean, like things like trying to get more federal support for crime fighting, trying to get more community support, trying to work harder at getting a way of recruiting police officers and retaining them. I mean, trying to make being an officer a better experience, and emphasizing that point also, trying to get more civilian people doing the clerical things that people have talked about, but just figuring out a better way to do it, and also trying to contact retired police officers and trying to get them involved. And so it was those kind of things, and a lot of technology. I mean, from drones to crime cameras and all that sort of thing. And so a lot of that kind of talk. It's almost like hearing about the war in Ukraine. I mean, the same sort of things. The standard. Anytime we hear about improving things in the police, maybe for the rest of our lives, the standard will always be Chief Pennington, who came in the 90s. And let's do what Chief Pennington did. In the first year or so, I mean, violent crime went down by 50%. I mean, he did those kind of things we're talking about. Now, after a few years, it went up again. And in the year that the crime went down in New Orleans, crime was going down nationwide, but still, he's still something that people want to look at. But the bigger picture, I mean, just seeing the accounts of all of this, here is this interim police chief getting what seemed to be like a warm reception from the council. She's got members of that committee of 500 who are talking and reinforcing her points. There's obviously a lot of communication. All of this tells me she's miles ahead to be the next police chief.
Permanent police chief.
Yeah, because she's there, she's working with him. So if she can kind of sustain things, and if nothing really bad happens, then I think yesterday, what happened this week, is a big turn in the direction of her being the permanent police chief at some point.
Okay, and also included in that plan was targeting hotspots, which is something that Pennington did when he came in, with his CompStat. But as you mentioned, there's so much more technology now, and really relying on technology a lot to help them in those kind of, efforts to target hotspots, etc.
Yeah, and I think that's where the crime cameras and the and the drones come in. And hey, if they want the hotspots, they can call They can call me. I can tell them some hot spots right now. I mean, we all know where they are, okay?
Right. Just give anybody in New Orleans a phone call and they can tell them. Right. Okay, thanks a lot. Jeremy, let's go back on, over to you, because something that's really hanging over all of our heads as Louisiana residents, particularly in South Louisiana, if you're a homeowner, is insurance and just getting insured. Getting an insurance company who you feel confident in that is not going to go belly up, and then having them pay you if you do have some damages. So the legislature's trying to
pay them.
and be able to pay for it. The legislature has been special session trying to deal with this. Are they accomplishing anything?
They went in Monday. They were done by Friday, and they have approved a $45 million incentive fund for insurance companies. Look, anybody who lives in South Louisiana knows we got problems, and that it's a crisis, according to the insurance commissioner. Rates are skyrocketing. We've had more than a dozen companies in recent years either relocate, file for bankruptcy, or were shuttered. So this money is supposed to curb that, according to the insurance commissioner. Many lawmakers who voted for this, however, will tell you it's a gamble. There's no guarantee that it's going to work. Yeah. If it does work, it's only going to be temporary in nature. Many viewed it as a working example of corporate welfare. There was barely any conversation whatsoever this week about consumers and how to help them. There was a moment where Insurance Commissioner Jim Donlin, who claims he's running for re-election, told the Republican delegation that consumers have a choice. They can go uninsured. And that
you can't if you have a mortgage.
You're
right. Required to have insurance.
And that was something that part of the criticism that the insurance commissioner has faced this week. But the House and Senate has approved the bill. They say they're going to come back in the regular session and try to move forward with some more significant reforms to try to create a long-term solution to this issue.
I've read that that Donlin has said that this does not guarantee lower premiums. Well, people that are still with Louisiana citizens are facing a 63% increase in their already expensive premiums.
A friend of mine this week faced a 100% increase in a business premium on a business property.
There's no guarantee it's going to lower rates. There is no guarantee whatsoever that it's going to entice companies to come here to write policies. In fact, if you go back and you look post-Katrina to when this fund was last implemented, the vast majority of the growth in writing new policies came from companies that did not tap into the incentive fund. That alone, that comes from a report from the legislative auditor this week. That alone tells you that sometimes the market will respond.
$45 million in this fund now that the legislature has approved. In terms of damages that hurricanes can inflict, $45 million, that doesn't sound that much, and that money will go to the insurance companies, not directly
it's supposed to be a
to
temporary. That's right, and there are some restrictions that were passed in a separate bill about companies that have officers that were involved in bankruptcies and other businesses. But this is a corporate program. It can only go to corporations, insurance companies. It's $45 million, and it's not a lot. It is meant to be temporary in nature.
So then those companies would not be able to help their customers potentially by, in some sort of way, maybe subsidizing premiums or lowering premiums. It's strictly just for the insurance companies.
The Department of Insurance will have some rule writing authority on this, but still, again, there's no guarantees from anyone that this is going to work, including the insurance commissioner.
Okay, a lot more work to do on that one, it seems. All right, Jeremy, thanks. And we'll wrap up with you, Rod, regarding the Pelicans. I mean, the Pelicans were really flying high, and then there were injuries, and so they've had some issues.
A lot more work to do with them,
yeah.
too. They've lost 10 games in a row, which isn't good at all. This is a team that, 1 month ago, they were at the top of the Western Conference standings, and now all of a sudden they're like in 10th place. Just haven't really been able to put it together. A big part of the reason is Zion Williamson has been injured with a hamstring injury, and Brandon Ingram is just coming back from a toe injury that lingered a lot longer than anybody thought it would. So Brandon's coming back, and this will be his fourth game back. So he's sort of starting to get back in his rhythm, but I don't think this team is going to be what they're capable of being until Zion gets back. And we're supposed to get an update on Tuesday. And, we don't know. That update could say, hey, we're going to reassess them again.
But it seems like Zion Williamson gets hurt often. I mean, if the whole future is based upon Zion Williams, not being hurt, can this team go anywhere? I mean, we had it last year, we had this year.
I think what you saw last year, though, you saw a team that Zion didn't play at all last season, and they were able to push the Phoenix Suns to 6 games in the playoffs, and I think that kind of had everybody inspired about what this team could be. They're definitely better with him in the lineup, as we saw at the beginning of the season, and again, I mean, they're going to have him back to be a championship-type team.
The injury he has is what?
It's a hamstring injury.
And how long does that generally take to be healed enough to go out there and play again?
It's one of those injuries that you have to be really careful with because it's so easy to re-injure it. So that's why they're being as patient as they possibly can with him. And so, I mean, it varies from person to person, but obviously, I mean, we know Zion's, you know, he's a bigger guy and very explosive. He's such a unique type athlete that I think with everything with him, you just want to be extra careful because you just don't want to. The future of this franchise is he's the cornerstone of all that.
Right. And he's been out for how long now?
He's missed, I think he's at 14 or 15 games now.
Oh, so a considerable amount of time.
Yeah,
They
and Brandon
need him
Ingram
back.
missed a lot more than that. So, I mean, you just have that
Yeah.
overlap of them two guys being out, and it just has decimated his team.
Okay, well, we hope things get better for the Pelicans. All righty, guys, time to go around the table. Other stories. E, over to you.
Well, the parades start this weekend, but I think that we're seeing the evolution of another issue, and that was with Congressman Morrell, who wants to introduce legislation about the whole governing of parades. There's been a lot of complaining from some of the smaller crews that's unequal in terms of what they have to pay, and part of it is that there's an official Mardi Gras route and an unofficial Mardi Gras route, and so it depends where you fall. But I think there's going to be a lot of big discussion, and I think a lot of the pain is just due to the uncertainty that we had this year, that really a lot wasn't known for a long time in terms of if they had parade, if there'd be enough police. But I think we're going to see a real big issue coming up this year.
And we see Krewe of Louisianians is really upset because their route was sort of abruptly, they say, changed to a much shorter one. They're not happy about that.
Yeah, they're right outside of what's considered to be the legal parade time, which would be next week.
Yeah.
And during that time, you can't parade in the quarter, but they can because of when they parade.
Okay, all righty. Rod, over to you.
Back to the Pelicans, a big weekend for them. They play the Lakers on Saturday. They play the Sacramento Kings on Sunday. The Lakers are coming in here. LeBron James is chasing history. He's only 63 points away from surpassing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the NBA's all-time leading scorer. So I think this is a really big weekend for a team that has lost 10 games in a row and really need to get back on track.
All right, Don?
Nothing upcoming, just a reminder that if you don't feel well, doctors say please just stay home and stay away from others.
Okay, no? Good advice. Jeremy?
Special session's over, so it's time to focus on the regular session. There's already a handful of bills filed, but that session begins April 10th, and in the coming weeks, there's going to be hundreds of more bills filed. Two big things on the agenda. It's the budget. We've got a lot of extra money to spend, and taxes. It's an odd numbered year, and that means they're going to get a little odd in Baton Rouge. That means taxes are on the table.
A little bit more odd than usual. Huh?
Odder.
And 10 years from now, the two big things on the agenda are going to be the budget and taxes.
That's right. That's right.
All right, guys, thanks a lot for being here. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a continued passion for public television, we are proud to underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES Television.